All right, welcome everybody and good morning. My name is Rafael Anchía. I'm a member of the Texas Legislature from Dallas, and I chair the International Relations and Economic Development Committee. I'm grateful for everyone's participation this morning. We're going to be covering a little bit of ground today on childcare as economic development. This is an offshoot of one of the interim charges for the committee. This is a town hall rather than a committee hearing so that we could comply with House rules and develop a workaround that stimulates member participation. We've invited all members of the legislature, and I see many of them who have come on the screen. I see Representative Minjares. I see Representative soon-to-be Senator Blanco, who goes by the name Sofia Morales on his screen. And I see a lot of staff from members across the Capitol. I also see State Representative John Rosenthal. I suspect, Ramon Romero, they're looking like the most interesting man in the world. Good to see you. And so there are a lot of members of the legislature who are on now and who will be joining us. And this is our way of hearing from the public. We are in a little bit of a legislative conundrum right now because the Capitol is closed as a result of COVID-19. And our House rules don't contemplate the use of technology like this to have virtual hearings. So we've developed a workaround so that members of the legislature can hear from members of the public virtually, keep you safe, keep us safe, and at the same time do the business of the legislature. Hey, John. And we have a really terrific group of invited testimony today. And I'll just spend a little bit of time going through their bios, and then we're going to turn it over to them. A couple of housekeeping items before I go through the bios. We are going to wait on questions until the end. Q&A will be following all 7 presentations. In addition to that, we had solicited questions from members of the legislature, and we have received some from Representative Howard, so I will ask those first. You'll notice that there's no chat function. That is to make sure we're complying with open records and open meetings. And we have disabled that to de-emphasize any chat among and between members that might run afoul of those 2 laws related to transparency. If you have questions during the Q&A period, please raise your hand through the raise your hand function, or just do so physically so that we can see you, and we'll get you recognized and get your question answered. The reason that the International Relations and Economic Development is having this hearing, first and foremost, is that IRED, as we call it, has jurisdiction over the Texas Workforce Commission Rising Star program, which is the rating system that we use at the state level. And then we also have jurisdiction and oversight over the grant program from TWC to childcare providers. We also, it almost goes without saying, but I feel as though I should set a little bit of context. We want to cover the importance of childcare in relation to economic development. Most people don't think of childcare in those terms. Not only does childcare provide almost $9 billion of positive economic impact to the state, but it also really unlocks parents to participate fully in the workforce of our state and generate income for their families. And obviously that translates into economic development for our community. So not only do we empower wage earners to enter the workforce by having robust childcare development options in their community, COVID-19 has exposed some vulnerabilities and limitations with respect to childcare in our society. And we want to surface some of those today, raise consciousness in the legislature about what we can do to help and how we can support our parents throughout the state. I recall as a child that my father had lost his job early in my childhood. I was probably 4 or 5 years old. And the only way my parents survived that episode is that we moved in with my madrina and my padrino. And we lived in a little 2-bedroom house with my madrina, my padrino, my madrina's mom, my madrina's dad, and my padrino's mom. And many of them were senior citizens, and my parents were able to go back into the workforce because Doña Salvacion and Doña Esperanza were there to watch me and to take care of me at the time. And so it was an empowering thing that helped my family get back on our feet. So we're going to be hearing from experts in the field about the importance of childcare. Let me just pivot really quickly and go over the bios of our speakers, if you'll bear with me just a moment. We have at the outset, we'll be hearing from Cindy Cisneros, Vice President of Education Programs at the Committee for Economic Development of the Conference Board, otherwise known as CED, in Arlington, Virginia. She's responsible for leading the portfolio of education work, which includes early childhood education, K-12, post-secondary, and workforce development. She will be followed by Reagan Miller. She's the Director of Childcare and Early Learning Division of the Texas Workforce Commission. We talked earlier about the rating system and the grant system that we have at TWC. She will be followed by Nneka Ebikwe Okafor. That's Dr. Nneka Ebikwe Okafor. She holds a PhD from the Human Development and Quantitative Methods Division at the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education, and her research sits at the intersection of developmental science, early childhood education, and social policy. After that, we will hear from Kim Kaufran, Executive Director of the Texas Association for the Education of Young Children, TAEYC, which is related to NAEYC, which provides a standard for a high quality standard for early education providers. And from Dallas, we have my longtime friend, Tori Manis. She's the president and CEO of the Child Care Group. She's a Dallas native and has been running the Child Care Group since, I want to say for almost 10 years, since 2011. And she's an honorary Child Care Group trustee and a past board chair. We also have Dr. Teresa Granillo. She's Chief Executive Officer of Avance. Many of us are familiar with Avance. I worked with Avance as a school board member, and she was the prior executive director, I should say, of Con Mi Madre, a two-generation organization that supports young Latinas on the path to higher education. Everybody knows Avance's work is helping parents become their children's first teachers. We will then hear from Chelsea Jeffrey. She's a senior manager at Early Matters Dallas. She's a native of Dallas County, having grown up in Coppell and attending Southern Methodist University, and a past member of Teach for America. And those are the opening introductions. So without further delay, I'd like to turn the program over to Cindy Cisneros. Welcome.
Okay, just double checking that I'm able to successfully share my screen. Thank you so much, Chairman Anchía. Good morning. Really appreciate this opportunity to provide a presentation on the important topic of the economic role of childcare. I'm honored to be here with esteemed guests. My name is Cindy Cisneros, and I serve as the Vice President of Education Programs at the Committee for Economic Development of the Conference Board. And CED is the public policy center within the Conference Board, and we're a national, nonprofit, nonpartisan, member-driven organization. Our business leaders know that a skilled workforce is critical to economic stability and vitality. CED believes access to quality, affordable childcare is a two-generation strategy. It helps fuel economic growth and the healthy development of young children. We know many parents who work include mothers of very young children. Prior to COVID-19, over 15 million children under age 6 had working parents, which in Texas includes 1.3 million children. In 2019, CED released a study, Childcare in State Economies, which reviewed the use of childcare by families and the impact of childcare on state economies. CED's study examined market-based care, which reflects paid childcare services, using the US Census Bureau economic census and county business pattern data, as well as non-employer statistics data from 2016. What we found is that childcare as an industry plays a significant role in state and regional economic growth. As an industry, which includes both center-based care and home-based care, the total economic impact in 2016 was $99 billion. This includes $47 billion in revenue and another $52 billion in spillover in other industries. In Texas, the total economic impact was about $9 billion, which includes nearly $4 billion in childcare revenue and another $5 billion in other industries. In terms of jobs, nationally, 1.5 million sole proprietors, home-based programs, and wage and salary employees in the childcare sector support more than 507,000 workers in other industries for a total jobs impact of over 2 million. In Texas, over 129,000 sole proprietors, home-based programs, and wage and salary employees in the childcare sector support 43,500 workers in other industries for a total jobs impact of more than 172,000 in the state. When parents have access to childcare, they are more likely to work. Without access to childcare, parents reduce their hours or opt out of the workforce altogether. Pre-COVID, 94% of workers involuntarily working part-time due to childcare challenges were women. Nationally, the use of paid childcare is highest among two-parent families working full-time and single-parent families working 35 hours or more per week. Both family types far exceed the overall usage rate of 59% across all family types. But families struggle with the availability, affordability, and quality of childcare. Employers are impacted, and according to some estimates, by more than $4.4 billion per year in productivity loss. The supply of childcare is uneven across communities. It is particularly uneven now. Throughout the spring, many childcare programs closed, and even those that have opened back up are reporting child enrollment down about 70%. Pre-COVID, childcare centers opened in areas where projections showed that the population is dense enough and has sufficient income to sustain a viable business model. Of concern, particularly in rural areas, is the decline in childcare homes for the past years. Home-based providers, hours are long, and the discharge parents do not offer an incentive. Average revenue is $15,000 per year. In Texas, CED's found that childcare homes have declined by about 8.2% since 2010. We have learned much in the past 5 to 6 months since COVID-19 has swept the country. We have long known that childcare is a business, but COVID-19 has exposed just how fragile the childcare business model is. Primarily dependent on fees paid by parents, the childcare industry collapsed across communities in all states. Parents stayed home with school-aged children when schools closed this past spring and pulled younger siblings from childcare since they were home. Other parents pulled children from childcare due to anxiety about potential exposure to COVID. Essential workers with children continue to use childcare, but low child enrollment threatened the viability of these businesses. Enrollment may ramp up somewhat as schools begin to open, but many are operating with remote instruction and others are operating with a hybrid schedule with on-site instruction within schools only a few days a week. This will impact the childcare market. Childcare is also impacted by high unemployment and the many families who have lost income. At 8.6% for June, Texas is below the national unemployment rate. However, at the same time, according to the most recent weekly Census Bureau Household Pulse Survey for the week of July 16th to the 21st, 60% of families with children in Texas have had a decline in income since March 13th, compared to 48% of households with no children. The demand for childcare is related to household income, which has clearly decreased. There are several ways to support childcare businesses and families, as both try to navigate their way in our normal. The vaccine is developed and the public is inoculated against the virus. For childcare businesses, states should make every action business technical assistance or TA available. We suppose ways need help to rethink the business model and we need now options that are available over the next year, especially this great time of uncertainty. The U.S. Small Business Administration has two programs that child businesses may want to review. Congress created the Paycheck Protection Program, known as PPP, as part of the Federal CARES Act enacted at the end of March. PPP offers a forgivable loan for borrowers who follow the designated rules. The primary rules involve maintaining employees or hiring them back, and then adhering to a 60-40 split on the money allocation, with 60% for payroll costs and 40% for fixed costs, such as mortgage and rent. Unfortunately, the deadline for our applications was a few days ago on August 8th. However, Congress is currently working on a broad-based package of COVID support, and if such a bill is passed, it is anticipated to carry with it an extension of the PPP program. One pending proposal by Senator Rubio, who's the chairman of the Senate Small Business Committee, would create a new second draw loan program. It essentially has the same rules as the PPP program, but it enables businesses who have exhausted their PP loan to take out another loan if they have fewer than 300 employees and at least a 50% decline in gross receipts. We do not know yet what will be in the final stimulus package, but these forgivable loans should be considered as options for individual businesses. Another program that can be used by child providers is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, or EIDL. This program offers loans at 3.75%.
Hey, Cindy, this is Rafael. I hate to interrupt you. Your internet's coming in and out. I don't know if you've got a phone camped on to your Wi-Fi, but maybe you throw the phone on mute. But because it's making it difficult to hear. Sorry.
No, thank you for letting me know. And Jeff, I'm going to close out my sharing screen because that will impact the quality of the sound and the video. So if you would not mind queuing up slide 5, that would be great. And see if that helps out at all. Great. Jeff, thank you so much, and apologies for the technical difficulties. So just to close out about the EIDL program, it does offer low interest loans at 3.75% for tax-paying businesses and 2.75% for nonprofits. Next slide. Texas also has another option. It is one of 27 states that operates a short-time compensation program, also known as a shared work program. The Federal CARES Act included 100% funding for employment compensation paid out of a shared work program, as well as administration costs of the program. For childcare providers, this could be a helpful option to explore. The way it works is that an employer signs an agreement with the Texas Workforce Commission, represented here today, which essentially enables an employer to reduce hours of an employee, but ensure that the employee receives both their earnings and a portion of his or her unemployment compensation. So, for example, an employee who used to work 40 hours per week and is reduced to 32 hours has a 20% reduction in hours. Under the shared work program, such an employee could receive their lower earnings plus 20% of their unemployment benefit, plus any weekly supplement that is paid for by the federal government. Right now, the federal supplement has expired. However, if the broad-based COVID package is passed, employees could receive all three sources of funding: the lower paycheck, partial unemployment, and a federal weekly supplement. Next slide. In March, also as part of the CARES Act, Congress increased child care funding by $3.5 billion. For Texas, the state had received more than $371 million. The concept was to help states stabilize the child care industry, to provide temporary operating support, and ensure that child care programs would remain open so that parents who return to the workforce have child care available. Many states have already exhausted that funding, and as we understand it, Texas is currently considering strategies for its remaining state funding. As part of the broad-based COVID bill being negotiated in Congress, additional funding is likely to be provided for child care. It is unclear at this time what that amount is going to be. House has passed several large increases for child care, an increase of 7 billion, an increase of 50 billion, one with an increase of 10 billion over 5 years with some tax credit provisions. The Senate also has legislation. Senator Murray introduced a bill providing $50 billion for child care, and another bill by Senators for calls for $25 billion for child care. The legislation announced last week by Senator McCollum, the majority leader in the Senate, includes $15 billion for child care. There also may be a need to increase child care subsidies to reach more low-wage working parents. With so many families who've had a decline in income, more could be eligible for a child care subsidy and may need it so that they can work or return to work. Child care is a business. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to help every child care provider. That is why it is really important there are several options available so that each child care business can determine which approach will support them best during this unprecedented time. What is clear is that parents need childcare in order to work, do additional training, or return to the workplace. There will be no full economic recovery unless there's a supply of childcare for working parents. That is why childcare is directly connected to economic development and economic recovery as an essential service and critical infrastructure. Next slide. CED has a specific webpage dedicated to federal resources that support the child care sector, plus other materials for states to use that can be accessed on our site at ced.org. Thank you again, Chairman, for the opportunity to share this information with the Texas House Committee on International Relations and Economic Development. Last slide. I'm happy to answer any questions following the presentations this morning and after the meeting today.
Cindy, thank you so much, and we're grateful for your participation today. I want to now invite Reagan Miller, Director of Childcare and Early Learning, Division at the Texas Workforce Commission to join us. Thank you for being here, Reagan.
Yes, thank you for inviting us. I think to help with bandwidth, I'll turn off my camera during the presentation. Hopefully that will help. All right, so want to confirm that you can see my screen now.
We can.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, so as the state's lead agency for the Child Care and Development Block Grant, the Texas Workforce Commission works with our 28 local workforce development boards and their workforce solutions offices across the state to oversee and implement child care services. So this morning, I'll provide an overview of our child care program, and then I'll discuss the agency's response to the COVID pandemic. So you can see I've outlined 3 overarching goals in our child care program. The first that many are aware of are child care subsidies to promote parents' long-term self-sufficiency. And as we've talked about, this really enables those parents to work and to contribute to the Texas economy. Chairman, you also mentioned our Texas Rising Star program. This is our focus on quality improvement. And a lot of times we don't recognize how that contributes to the economy, but we're really helping to build the foundation and the educational foundation for the future workforce of Texas through these quality early education programs. And then, of course, consumer education. We want to make sure that parents can make the best choices for their family's needs. So our subsidized child care program is available to serve low-income families who are working or are in education and training. This provides a high-level overview of our standard low-income child care program. And I wanted to give you guys some high-level numbers to provide some context about the program. So parents can select any provider that they want to send their child to for services. And looking at the far left-hand side of the slide, you'll see that of all of the kids that we're serving in the subsidy program, about 95% of them have selected services in a licensed child care center. When you look at the middle of the page, as we look at all of the licensed centers in the state of Texas, about 60% of them have 1 or more subsidized children in their care. But as you take a look at the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that TWC subsidy kids only make up about 12% of all of the regulated capacity in the state. So as Cindy was just mentioning, childcare is primarily supported by fees paid by parents. You can see that subsidies really only account for 12% of that overall childcare business in the state of Texas. So even though we're not the majority or even close to the majority of all childcare in the state, you can see that we work with 60% of all of the licensed centers in the state. And a little caveat, this was all pre-COVID data. Obviously, there's been a lot of changes in the number of open and closed providers in the state. Generally, the demand for subsidized childcare really exceeds funding availability. So the boards maintain waiting lists for childcare. Each year, TWC provides the boards with their annual performance expectation on the number of kids to be served per day. And so boards are managing their funding based on that performance target. And as kids move off the rolls, they'll enroll more. And you can see we've come down significantly since May of 2018. We received a significant influx of federal funds prior to COVID when Congress increased the appropriation for the Child Care Block Grant. As those additional federal funds came into the state and we made additional money available, we were able to increase the number of kids that we were serving, thus decreasing the waiting list. And you'll see that over time, we were around 99,000 average kids per day receiving subsidies. That jumped up to 130,000 in 2019 with those new federal funds. We're currently in 2020. And when we started the year, we thought we'd be around 135, 36,000. But our costs are increasing as a result of COVID. For example, when schools closed last spring, all of those school-age kids who had been enrolled in after-school care, part-time care, now needed full-time care. And so full-time care is more expensive. So we had a lot of these contributing factors that just meant that childcare costs were higher. So we are going to be able to serve fewer kids this year than originally anticipated. So we've been talking about childcare and the economy. Our program assists childcare businesses. It's multifaceted. It's helping the business, it's helping the parent, and it's helping educate our youngest kids. As we think about childcare as a business, one of the things, for example, that we've recently done is made an investment of about $3 million to support a business accelerator program. And through a competitive RFP, we awarded a contract that just began and that we expect is going to help 2,000 childcare programs all across the state help improve their business stability and viability. We also know how important a stable childcare industry is. It not only helps the industry itself, but we all know that it fosters a more robust Texas economy by supporting those working parents. The Department of Labor's 2019 data shows that over 64% of married families had children with both parents working. So that's a critical need for childcare in those families. And we know that single parent families often face those same types of challenges in accessing childcare. And as I mentioned before, at the same time, it allows us to educate and prepare our youngest learners, our future workforce. So speaking of our young learners, providing quality education and learning experiences is so, so important. I think we all know that studies show that high quality early education helps to improve school readiness. Those high quality learning environments promote healthy brain development. They offer sensitive and responsive caregiving. They help with cognitive language stimulation, and they have safe and healthy environments for our kids. This kind of quality education really is helping build our future workforce, and it's part of the goal of our Texas Rising Star program. This program is authorized under state law. It's a voluntary quality rating system that under state law is available to those childcare programs that are part of the state's subsidized childcare system. So each year we provide boards with funding to support the Texas Rising Star mentors and assessors. Those are those local staff who are working with childcare programs who want to become TRS or want to increase their star level. As I mentioned, we had that big influx of federal funds. When we saw that increase, we were able to up the investment. Previously, we were putting in about $3.4 million per year for those Texas Rising Star staff, and now we're investing over $10 million a year in those Texas Rising Star staff. So we're able to serve more programs. The boards also get 2% of their annual allocation to use towards quality improvement initiatives that they design and develop locally. Many of those are directed at Texas Rising Star programs. And then, of course, the tiered reimbursement rates under state law, which provide a higher level of daily reimbursement for these quality programs. So you can see that over the past few years, we have been seeing increases in the number of providers who are rated as a quality program under Texas Rising Star. Last session, there was some legislation passed that asked us to publish information on an annual basis about Texas Rising Star, the numbers of providers, the number of kids. We're trying to go a little bit further than just putting that in an annual report. So we have launched Childcare by the Numbers, a new web page that was just released that has information back to 2015, both at the state level and by local boards, outlining the number of kids that have been served generally, and then in Texas Rising Star, as well as the number of providers that are engaged in this. It's our first iteration of these numbers. We're working on the second version already to build out this data. For example, we'll be adding more detail about the 2, 3, and 4-star status of our Texas Rising Star programs. Next, I'll talk a little bit about our board reimbursement rates. As I mentioned, parents can select any regulated provider in the state to take their children, and as long as that provider is willing to accept the board's rates, then boards will enter into an agreement to place those children at that provider. Our boards establish their maximum reimbursement rates. There are hundreds and hundreds of rates because rates are based on the provider type, the age of the child, and their Texas Rising Star quality level. Boards use the annual market rate survey that TWC contracts with the University of Texas to conduct every year. That's a survey that looks at the entire childcare industry and how much the rates are in all of the 28 areas. Again, this is not just for subsidy programs, it's the full market, the full childcare market. A little history about some reimbursement rate enhancements that have been made in the recent years, again, as a result of the increased federal funds. In 2019, we provided a 2% across the board rate increase for all providers, but we really focused on what we can do for our quality Texas Rising Star programs. And we implemented a new model to benchmark those against the 75th percentile of the market rate survey. So 4-star providers receive reimbursement rates at that higher level. 3 stars receive 10% below that, and 2 stars receive 10% below that. This is a chart at the bottom of the screen is just one example from one board area. We picked 4-year-olds, but you can see how rates increased from 2018 to 2020. In a 4-star provider serving 4-year-olds, they went from 28.25 to 37.55 in fiscal year 20. That's about a 33% increase in this particular example. Again, we're really hoping that these bigger increases for Texas Rising Star programs serve as an incentive for more programs to become quality programs, thus helping our youngest kids with those early education opportunities. So now I'll transition and talk a little bit about the actions that TWC has taken following the COVID pandemic. Obviously, we all know it's impacted our childcare providers. We've already talked a little bit about that. Childcare regulation within HHSC provides us with information that they collect as the state's regulatory oversight body. And this is a snapshot of providers that are in the subsidy system. You can see that in May, we had over 3,600 subsidy providers closed. That's down to around 1,500, a little below that, as of August the 7th. Generally speaking, and this is an average, but generally speaking, we have about 6,500 regulated providers with 1 or more kids in care. Again, that can fluctuate depending upon where parents have elected to put their kids. But using that as an estimate, we're still seeing about a 23% overall reduction in subsidy providers. So next, I'll talk a little bit about some of the actions that TWC has taken that impact both families and providers. This is an overview of those actions, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about some of these right now. So first, we helped to develop a new online availability portal. It's a voluntary tool that allows childcare providers to indicate how many available slots they have by age group. Parents can then go into this portal and do a zip code search by the age of their child to actually find out where is their space available near me. This isn't anything that was available previously. Parents had to pick up the phone and call a lot of providers to figure out who has space and who can take my child. So this new system, these are some of our statistics. You see that when we launched it April 9th, we had about 3,300 providers using the system. As of August 10th, we had 4,120 providers using the system. Those are the stats on the available seats. And you'll see that proportionately infant seats are the lowest. Right now, only about 13% of all of the slots available are for infants. I think we all hear what a challenge that is to find seats for our youngest kids. We were also asked to provide some information, kind of looking at the waiting list versus what we're seeing in that availability portal. So one of the things I want to note is that while you'll see that there are available seats, those are available seats for all parents in Texas. Our waiting lists are waiting lists for low-income parents. And so while we may see that there are enough seats for these low-income parents, as I've mentioned before, there are funding challenges. We don't have enough money, so we have waiting lists. So yes, we certainly have available seats across the state that private pay parents can access, but we're continuing to maintain those waiting lists. And right now, most boards have closed enrollment locally because they don't have funds available now to enroll more children into care. All right, so one of the first things we did was to create an essential worker childcare program. This was designed as a short-term emergency benefit, really to help parents when schools closed. A lot of parents really hadn't planned for and budgeted for schools to be closed and the need to provide childcare when those kids would normally be in school. So this was a 3-month benefit for those essential worker children, and was really designed to help provide parents with the opportunity to access childcare and give them a chance to make longer range childcare plans. We had some simplified eligibility for this, and we enrolled approximately 29,000 children into this essential worker childcare program. We have also implemented an enhanced reimbursement rate. We have received a great deal of feedback from stakeholders as well as from several legislative members about the higher cost of childcare during COVID. We hosted a child care provider stakeholder conference call, and on the slide, you can see examples that they provided us of the higher costs that they're facing as a result of COVID. So this 25% enhanced reimbursement rate was intended to help defray some of those higher costs that child care providers are experiencing. We also implemented some assistance for our subsidy providers that had to temporarily close, but who have plans to reopen. If those providers weren't able to access and receive a PPP fund, those grants that Cindy just described, then they could apply to TWC to receive a monthly stabilization grant. These grants are scaled based upon the size of the program. So those we had originally intended to make those available June, July, and August, with the assumption that providers would be reopening when schools open. Obviously, we're reevaluating all of these things, but this stabilization grant is currently available for closed providers. And then a little bit about our parent copay. So in our subsidy program, all parents are required to pay for a portion of their child care. We temporarily waived these payments in April and May, and the state picked up those costs because at the beginning of the pandemic, child care providers were closed to all except essential workers. And we knew that subsidy parents who weren't actually bringing their kids into care likely weren't going to be paying that child care copayment. So by the state paying this, we ensured that the fiscal revenue stream for those providers wasn't impacted. But as the governor's executive order reopened child care to all families on May 18th, we revised our temporary waiver. I will note that parent copays resumed, but under our existing rules, those amounts can be modified if parents have extenuating circumstances that impact the affordability. We had several other policy changes that are still in effect. An extended absence policy so that kids' eligibility isn't impacted if they're not able to be there and providers continue to be paid. We have temporarily extended the length of time that unemployed parents can continue to receive childcare, and we've extended eligibility redeterminations, which are generally set at 12 months. We've also been working to help childcare providers access some critical supplies. We heard from many providers that they just, and especially initially, couldn't access PPE and cleaning supplies. So using that online availability portal, we're surveying providers to determine if they'd like to purchase supplies, and then partnering through the Texas Division of Emergency Management, TDEM takes those orders and distributes those to providers through the AgriLife Extension local offices. We've already done 2 rounds of supply distribution, and we're pursuing our 3rd round right now. So in summary, these are the supports that currently are in effect right now. TWC will continue to evaluate these supports to determine if they need to be modified. And then a little bit about the funding. Cindy mentioned this. Texas did receive $371 million in that Child Care Development Block Grant, CARES Act funding. To date, $200 million of this amount has been budgeted to support essential worker childcare and those enhanced reimbursement rates. We are currently considering the best strategies for investing the remainder of the funds. We have received input from stakeholders, from legislators on things that the state should consider, and those are outlined in this slide. All of these inputs are currently being considered, and I hope that we will soon have recommendations and we'll be moving forward in August with some final decisions. And with that, Chairman Anchía, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to present today, and I will turn it back over to you.
Reagan. I just want to scan the boxes here and just give a shout out to the members who are participating. I see once again we have Representative Ramon Romero, Representative and soon to be Senator Cesar Blanco, John Rosenthal, Representative Ina Mijares, and I saw Representative Donna Howard earlier, Representative Aaron Zwiener, Representative Marianne Perez. I'm looking to see if I'm missing anybody, but we have a pretty good representation of the members of the House. And then there are just a ton of people who are on the phone. And regrettably, I can't see your names, but thank you all for participating. And then we have staff members from a lot of different offices represented on the call as well. Let me go ahead and recognize the next member of the panel. I just want to make sure I'm getting all of this right. Here we go. The chair would like to recognize Nneka Ebikwe Okafor. Make that Dr. Nneka Ebikwe Okafor. Welcome.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm gonna follow Reagan's lead and turn off my video. That seemed to work really well. So thank you, Chairman Anchía, for bringing this conversation to the forefront and for recognizing the sense of urgency that we must take as a state to protect the childcare industry. Because not only is quality childcare essential for working parents, but it is key to the economic viability of our state. My name is Nneka. I'm the Director of Early Education Research and Policy at Children at Risk, a statewide research and advocacy organization. I want to start by reiterating what Reagan mentioned briefly, because it should always be served as a reason for why we work to increase access to quality early learning. We know that decades of research have already proven that exposure to quality early learning opportunities leads to optimal developmental outcomes across multiple developmental domains. We know that if we invest early, we see greater returns in the end, like children ready for kindergarten, higher graduation rates, and individuals ready to enter the workforce. And we know that this is especially true for children developing in low-income environments. Quality early learning opportunities can serve to buffer those negative effects associated with poverty on later life outcomes. As Cindy mentioned earlier, and I think it's worth noting again, that the childcare industry has a significant impact on our state's economy. The childcare industry has an estimated $8.7 billion impact on the state's economy, with their direct revenue of $3.6 billion. We also know that COVID studies recently have shown that more women are leaving the workforce because of childcare needs. So expanding access to reliable, affordable, quality childcare becomes even more essential to help workers, businesses, and the Texas economy. So in order to understand where we are headed as an industry, it's also important to understand what the industry looked like prior to COVID. So in Texas, childcare sits in two agencies, the Texas Health and Human Services, which houses licensing, and the Texas Workforce Commission, which you just heard from Reagan. TWC manages our state subsidy program and the federal funding through the Child Care Development Block Grant. So as a reminder, in 2018, Texas received a historic amount of money, increasing our previous amount by 45%. With this additional funding, the state made many great investments that put us on a path towards quality. And the CARES Act, we received roughly $371 million in additional CCDB funding. And the reason why I bring this up is because it's important to understand how our money flows in Texas in order to understand some of the gaps that COVID has exposed in our industry. And so to help you visualize this, so the $747 million, the Texas Workforce Commission dispersed this to 28 local workforce boards, who then dispersed these funds across roughly 8,000 childcare providers in the subsidy program. And so this reaches roughly 130,000 children daily, covering only 10% of those eligible children. So you can see that in 2019, roughly 8,000 providers participated in the subsidy program. This is less than half of all providers across the state, many of which are not part of the state's quality rating and improvement system. So any direct funds that providers receive through the subsidy program will leave out a large portion of our industry. So prior to COVID, we know that we had many childcare deserts and many childcare quality deserts, subsidy childcare deserts. And to get a sense of what that looks like by district, on our website, many of you can go on and find legislative profiles to help you understand what the districts look like before COVID. We also know that prior to COVID, many providers struggled to make ends meet, and specifically when it came to reimbursement rates. They were just simply too low to meet the cost of quality. So for example, the true cost of quality for childcare in a center for infants is roughly $15,000 a year. But in Texas, our highest reimbursed providers, those rated in our 4-star TRS rated program, are receiving half of that amount. So you can imagine that our industry that was already struggling prior to COVID is struggling even more. At the beginning of the pandemic, we conducted a statewide survey to get a sense of the impact of COVID on childcare across the state. Many providers indicated that they had seen a steady decline in enrollment and attendance. They have experienced a shortage in staff. Many providers indicated that they struggled because of the minimal supports that they receive for the private paying side of their business. Many of the new health and safety rules are costly. Many need assistance when it comes to applying for loans. And because of the cost of providing, and because the cost for providing care to older age children is more profitable, some providers are choosing not to serve our infants and toddlers. In light of all of this, I do want to acknowledge the great efforts that TWC did for stepping in and attempting to address many of the issues that are impacting our providers. As our industry continues to suffer, and I strongly encourage our Texas leadership to invest the remaining $171 million into the industry that is deemed as essential to our economy. Because if we don't, we're going to continue to see an increase in our closed providers. So what can legislative staff do to help as we move towards this new reality?
Sorry, Nneka, can you go back to the last slide really quickly, the one on closed providers, and just let that one marinate just for a second?
Yes.
Through it? Thank you.
Of course. So as I mentioned before COVID, we were on this path towards quality. And this was evident in the investments made through the Child Care Development Block Grant. As we work to adjust to our new reality, we can't lose sight of the importance of quality, affordable childcare. As I mentioned previously, it is the foundation to future academic and economic success. And so mandating participation in our state's quality rating and improvement system prioritizes quality while simultaneously creates transparency and accountability of government dollars. We need to raise reimbursement rates if we want quality care. Currently, there are federal guidelines that allow the states to reimburse childcare providers at a higher rate than their published rate. Texas has not allowed this to happen until COVID-19. And with the additional costs associated with COVID-19, such as increased sanitation expenses and the adjusted group ratio, it makes the need for increased reimbursement rates even more essential to allow providers to comply with public health safety. So shared services is a great business model that allows providers to share resources like administrative duties and to purchase materials in bulk. The model saves providers time and money and allows them to focus on providing quality care. Prior to COVID, our state invested some of the CCDBG dollars in this area, and as a result of COVID, many more providers could benefit from this model. So we are asking that the state look at this business model as a sustainability strategy for the childcare industry. House Bill 3 was a great initiative to solidify a comprehensive early childhood system. And pre-kindergarten partnerships is key to the sustainability of the early childhood system. It helps to stabilize pre-kindergarten seats in childcare, and it is a great opportunity to blend funded streams and maximize government dollars. COVID has also highlighted that our early childhood educators are essential to our economy. And it is time that we invest in them adequately by developing a statewide plan to help educators enhance their early learning opportunities and training opportunities, and to help, and most importantly, to just compensate them so that they're earning living wages. And so we want legislators to advocate for additional federal dollars, like the $50 billion that would come from the Child Care is Essential Act. Because as I mentioned previously, our childcare industry largely depends on federal dollars. Many of our providers that we're speaking to emphasize the need for cross-agency collaboration and messaging. Parents and providers need timely and transparent data to make informed decisions. As we continue to learn about the impact of COVID, we ask for flexibility and legislative action. And lastly, through all of this, we need to continue to focus on the quality of early learning that our children receive to ensure that we have a workforce ready when COVID is no longer a concern. So I will just put this out there that at the end of this month, we will be releasing our investment and innovation report that goes into many more details that I talked about today. And so please look out for that. And so I want to end and say thank you everyone for your time, and thank you specifically Chairman Anchía.
Thank you, Doctor. I want to go ahead and invite, go back to my screen here, Kim Kaufran, the Executive Director of the Texas Association for the Education of Young Children. Welcome, Kim.
Hello, everyone, and I too am going to stop my video, so I hope that will help, and get started. So thank you, Chairman Anchía, for having us here today and being able to, which screen are you guys seeing? Are you seeing the big one or my notes?
We can see both.
All right, let me stop and do this again. Sorry. Here we go. Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay, so I've got the two screen thing going, and it confuses me when I share screen sometimes. So, so thank you for being here and spending some time with us to talk about this topic that all of us on the panel spend our days and nights thinking about and working on. So my name is Kim Kaufran. I am the Executive Director of the Texas Association for the Education of Young Children. We are the state affiliate of NAEYC. Hopefully many of you are familiar with that, or our national organization setting the standards for high quality early childhood education. We're the largest early childhood association in Texas with approximately 3,000 members. 65% of our members are educators and administrators working directly with children every day from birth through age 8. We provide professional development for not just our members, but for all early childhood professionals in Texas, and we have several programs that are housed with us as well. One of them being our Teach Early Childhood Texas program, which provides scholarships funded through TWC and the Child Care Development Block Grant. That program provides scholarships for our educators to go back and get their Child Development Associate credential, their associate's degree, and new this fall they can start working on their bachelor's degree as well. So we're very excited about that, that addition to the programming. We also have a research pre-K partnership grant through TEA and TWC, and we also house the Healthy Childcare Texas program, which is a program housed through DSHS to increase health and safety, outdoor learning, and health practices in childcare. So that's a little bit about us. And so what I'm really going to focus on today is the early childhood workforce. The workforce which supports the current workforce, which is educating the future workforce. So this early childhood workforce that so often gets forgotten about and sometimes set aside is so vital to our current workforce getting back to work, as well as they are at the forefront of teaching our future workforce and educating them and giving them the foundation for future learning and school ready and our future workforce. So currently, our educators that are in the classroom, we've got about 89,000 early childhood workforce in Texas. The vast majority of them are women, and specifically women of color. They are traditionally undereducated and undercompensated. And when I say undereducated, what that means is our minimum standards through our child care regulations, or what we used to call licensing, the only requirement for our educators is to have a high school diploma, have a clean criminal background check, and have at least 24 clock hours, not credit hours, clock hours of pre-service training before they can work with children. Research shows us that we know that educators need more than that. They need a degree to support their learning and education, but that's not where our current standards are. Because of a result of that, we are also lowerly compensated. But we'll get to compensation in just a second. Through TWC and the Child Care Development Block Grant, we do have the TEACH program in Texas. It's a licensed program that is in about 25 other states, and we are blessed that we've had it since 2011. And like I said, we have been having the CDA, which is a credential. It's similar to a CNA in the nursing field, and associate's degrees for quite a while. And this year, thanks to TWC, we have been able to add bachelor's degrees as well as apprenticeships, supporting apprenticeships, which is an exciting thing to be around. Also, just kind of a standard as far as COVID, several years ago, NAEYC, along with 14 other national early childhood organizations, set out on working on what they call Power to the Profession, which really defined who we are as a profession, what our education and experience levels need to be in order to do our work. That has now turned into unifying framework for the early childhood profession and really lays out a plan of how we need to get our current workforce, our current early childhood workforce, educated and compensated over the next decades, because it will take that long to make this work happen. But that framework exists. The work has been done. We have a pathway. It's now time for us as a state to figure out how we are going to implement that and make it live in Texas. Then COVID hit, right? So where are our workforce today? Due to COVID, one of the positive things, I hate to even say that word, is some of our educators are actually focusing on school. We're seeing some of them finish that CDA program they started a year ago but never had time, because they had time now. We have our applications are coming in for the fall enrollment for associates and bachelor's degrees. So are they where they need to be? No, but we are seeing an uptick in that. The CDA credential has slowed. Part of the CDA credential is you have to have a specialist come out and watch you in your classroom. Well, right now that's not happening because our licensed centers aren't bringing anybody in besides workers due to COVID reasons. So those things have slowed, and we're seeing a slow, they're getting their training done, but they can't get across the finish line quite yet. So they're just kind of on hold. And the technology is a huge concern for our workforce. We had several stories that were shared with us over the last couple of months. And one in particular struck us all was we had a teach recipient, so a woman who is working on her associate's degree, working full-time in a childcare center in a preschool classroom. She was on, when spring break hit and we all went online, all of her classes went online. Her center closed, and so she was providing Zoom classes for her 3 and 4-year-olds throughout the day. And her 5 children were also going to school online, and they were sharing one computer. So you have all this happening with one computer in their homes. Teachers are attending their Zoom classes on their cell phones, and then because they don't have the bandwidth or they're sharing, they're being resourceful, they're being careful, but they don't have the technology. And centers are dealing with the same thing. Programs don't have the technology. They're asking their teachers to do Zoom classes with their staff, but they are with their children, but they have to use their personal computers to do that. So technology is a huge concern for our field and our workforce. Compensation. Compensation. So 56% of our, before COVID, 56% of our workforce were on one form of public assistance because they met the requirements. They earn $9.13 an hour on average. So if we invested in our compensation for our workforce and raised them up, we would actually be able to get them off public assistance, which would save us some tax dollars. And an educator working in childcare with a bachelor's degree makes more than 50% less than her counterpart in the public school system with the same degree. Think about that, more than 50% less with the same degree, teaching the same children, teaching 3 and 4-year-olds, but one's in a childcare center and one's in a public school. That has to do with the funding systems. Since COVID, we are seeing that at least 70% of our teach recipients have a reduction in hours. Their centers have cut their hours because enrollment's down, and they're doing different shift works and different creative scheduling. 44% of programs from Texas, which are Texas specific, that recently answered an AC survey have engaged in furloughs, pay cuts, and layoffs. And according to the Small Business Association, only about 21% of our early childhood programs or childcare programs participated and received the PPP loan. Not enough. They need it as well. And in order for the early childhood industry to work, in order for that business model to work, one of our colleagues, Louise Stoney from Opportunities Exchange, talks about the iron triangle of the business model. You have to have full enrollment, you have to have revenue that covers the costs per child, and you have to be able to collect all of those fees. Parents have to pay them. Full enrollment. Current stats are about 56 or 57% in capacity. You talk to different centers, some of them are down to 30 or 40% capacity. Some of them are lucky to be closer to 70%, but they're all suffering because enrollment is down. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's parents don't have jobs, therefore they're not sending their kids. They're home with the older kids, so they might as well take the younger kids out as well and save some money. And third, they're scared. They're still nervous about going back in the world of COVID, and will their children be safe? So enrollment's down. revenue, we know we are so thankful for TWC to increase with their 25%, but that's still not covering the true costs of care. We know the reimbursement rates, as much as they have increased, and we're thrilled with that 30% increase that Reagan talked about earlier, it's still not covering the true cost of care. Like NECA showed, it's when reimbursement rates are really only still covering about 50% of those costs. That's not enough, and we know that needs to happen. And then, of course, full collection of fees. Parents have to be able to pay those fees, and they have to be able to collect. And if their incomes have decreased, which bills do we pay? Is a question that many families are asking. We know, according to the NACE survey, only 18% of providers will last more than a year with less than 80% enrollment. 18%. What's that going to do to our economy if that doesn't improve? We need childcare, all childcare, to be there for the workforce to go back and our economy to return as we wish. We know there's extra costs, and we've talked about a lot of these already. The lower ratios and group sizes to help prevent the spread of COVID. We know those are needed to keep for children to be safe and healthy, and for their educators to be safe and healthy, but they also come at a cost. The higher cost of cleaning and disinfecting materials, and those technology expenses, offering online learning while schools are closed, and then really being able to pivot the business model to support school-age online learning. I know you have heard in your communities of centers and programs trying to be able to offer those pods learnings, or opening up their school-age programs to allow the online virtual classrooms happening at the center, so mom and dad can still go to work, but yet they can still attend school virtually at the center. Centers are trying to pivot, but that's all creative, and there's challenges with funding stream between all the different funding streams that play into that. We hear it say that, I can't wait for it to get back to be normal. And I wish things were back to where they were in January and February when life was simpler. And I too long for those days, and look forward to when we're not, when there's a vaccine and we can all get back to our lives. However, I want to challenge us that our normal was broken. Our systems were broken before. And so let's not go back to normal, but let us be bold and really think about how can we fix this system. We have a moment in time to really take a deep breath and think and look at the perspective from the 30,000 feet all the way down to the granular to really figure out what's best. Yes, we need to spend this $171 million that we haven't allocated yet from the CARES funding. We need it now, and it needs to be spent. Continue to improve those reimbursement rates, maintain that 25% increase, and encourage us to continue to do more. Really think about coordinating the systems of educating all children birth through 18. We all know a child does not develop in a vacuum. We know that many things infect their lives, from what their parents do, to their school systems, to the healthcare that they have, to how much food they have on their table. All those things play together with each other. And the more we can coordinate those services and make sure our agencies know what the other ones are doing to support the whole child and the whole child's development, the better our systems will be, and the better our workforce will be in the future. And what NECA talked about earlier is developing that statewide workforce development plan. We have the blueprint set out by the unifying framework. So now we need to take that unifying framework and really see how we're going to do it in Texas. How are we going to get our current workforce and move them there? It won't happen overnight. It can't happen overnight. But how are we going to set the stages in place, the stepping stones in place for us to move that to that level? And really encourage all of our ECA, early childhood providers, to participate in TRS. We know it's a volunteer system right now, but how can we really move all centers towards quality, all centers to making sure they're doing the best they can for children and for families and their early childhood workforce. The best return on investment is early childhood. It will not only invest in, it not only supports the entire economy to get back to work, but it will support the early childhood workforce themselves to be self-sufficient and get off public assistance, as well as support tomorrow's workforce by providing strong educational foundation to the children that they're educating every day. So Chairman Anchía, thank you again for having us here today and giving us this opportunity. And I'll be happy to answer questions when everybody's done.
Thank you, Kim. That presentation sort of provides some context for the staggering challenge that we have in front of us. I mean, and members, if I can just contextualize it really quickly and maybe summarize two important decisions that we're going to have to make in conjunction with our executive branch partners. One is, what do we do with the remaining 170 million or so dollars that we received from the block grants and the CARES Act? There's been an investment of the first 200 million, 170 million remains. So we need to be thinking about that, especially in light of the very delicate position of some of our childcare providers that, you know, wherein only about 18% might survive a year from now. And how do we invest in that infrastructure today so it doesn't melt away and we have to recreate it? And then the second, I think, inflection point will be during the next legislative session, as we have an opportunity to reimagine a new normal for the provision of childcare in the state. Because as Kim pointed out there, even though we've invested more money and we've gone to kind of a universal 4-year-old childcare regime in the state, which was, I think, an important sea change during last session in our education funding bill, for those children that are birthed through 4 or 5 years old, there's still a pretty significant gap that our childcare providers are filling. And we need to think about reimagining that new normal. So I just wanted to provide that little segue for the people who are on YouTube Live and watching this currently. Been getting a little feedback via text and otherwise about the slides. I just want to let people know that for those who have registered, Jeff Madden, who's the committee director of the International Relations and Economic Development Committee, will be circulating all the slides. You can also, if you need to go back and watch some of this invited testimony, you can do that on my YouTube page, Rafael Anchía, and then I think there's a /TX or something like that. So check that out. I don't know how to work the UWeb tubes, but you spend some time going through that. All right, we're going to pivot now to our next speaker, and that's my longtime friend, Tori Manis from Dallas. Tori is Executive Director and President of the Child Care Group. Welcome, Tori, and we anxiously await your testimony.
Tori, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute, Tori. You just satisfied my Zoom bingo right there.
Somebody had to do it, right?
Yeah.
So great. Okay. Thank you so much, Chairman Anchía. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today and really provide what I'd like to think of as kind of the boots on the ground perspective from a provider of early childhood services and the manager of child care subsidy programs. So the Child Care Group, which is the organization I represent, is a 119-year-old nonprofit that was founded in Dallas as the first settlement house in Texas. Back then, and then still today, we operate with a 2-generation strategy that helps educate young children and support their parents as they go to work or go to school to strive for self-sufficiency. We really believe that children do better as their parents do better. And when families thrive, our communities succeed. Today, we operate nationally accredited early Head Start and Head Start programs in 3 counties in Texas, partnering with 7 independent school districts. We also manage the child care subsidy program for 3 workforce boards in 10 Texas counties. Altogether, our platform and our breadth of service touches the lives of 40,000 children, parents, and early childhood educators every year, which is really gives us a unique perspective on not only understanding the importance of early education and childcare, but also the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on this really important industry. Now, as my other colleagues have said, we know high quality early learning programs provide such an important foundation for the more than 1.1 million Texas children who are in childcare. And it's also an essential service that enables their parents to go to work. But also high quality early learning programs support everything that science tells us about the importance of brain development in the lives of young children in the first 5 years. So in short, quality early learning programs and childcare programs support today's workforce and prepare tomorrow's workforce. But what we've seen over the last several months is COVID-19 has really exposed the fragile infrastructure and inherent inequities in this industry. We've got insufficient sources of funding, low wages, varying levels of quality among providers, and frankly, an outdated reputation for being more about babysitting than education. According to the National Women's Law Center, women, and disproportionately women of color, make up 94% of the childcare workforce. Many of our childcare business owners are women and women of color who are limited by low levels of personal wealth and challenges in accessing business credit. And many of those providers, and especially the ones that we work with and talk to every day, are now facing immediate or near-term risks to their continued operations. And yet, childcare has been considered an essential business throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And while our K-12 teachers and Head Start teachers have been able to continue teaching remotely from the safety of their own homes, childcare providers have been expected to keep their doors open despite the personal health risks and the inherent costs to serve the children of those who have to go to work. We've talked about all the essential workers. Well, I believe that these childcare workers really are our frontline heroes. They are what I like to call the workforce behind the workforce that powers all the other parents across our state and our nation to go to work. And every provider that I've spoken to, from Dallas to Waco to Beaumont, is doing everything they can to follow all the safety and health guidelines and continue caring for and educating our young children despite these challenges. But they really need our help, and they need it now. And I really hope this crisis will compel us to address the inequities, improve policies, and create a system of accessible, high-quality early learning for all young Texans. Through our work as a childcare subsidy contractor, we work closely with providers and our local workforce boards to implement the policies and guidelines submitted that have been promulgated by the Texas Workforce Commission. And I want to also say how very grateful we are to Texas Workforce Commission for stepping in and stepping up to support our early learning professionals and the children and families who are part of the system. We've already gone through, Reagan did a great summary of all of their initiatives, but the Frontline Childcare website has been a tremendous point of access for so many parents across our state. The continued payment of subsidy reimbursements and the 25% enhanced rate for enrolled children has been very helpful, as has the suspension of attendance tracking while children have not been in the program. Allowing the use of funds to purchase cleaning supplies and PPEs for subsidy providers, they had trouble from the very beginning accessing the supply chain for these items. And Child Care Group and our partners across the state have helped conduct supply drives and distributions to help these providers get access to these needed materials. So those are just a few ways that TWC has responded, and I can tell you that it makes an enormous difference in helping to support and stabilize the childcare industry. And yet, despite the support, hundreds of childcare businesses across the state have closed their doors. In the 3 workforce board areas that Child Care Group works with, in Dallas County, the Heart of Texas area, and Southeast Texas, closures have reduced overall capacity by 27%, meaning that 1 in 4 childcare seats in these areas are no longer available. And that's overall capacity. Now, when we look just at the childcare subsidy providers, which is about 60% of the total capacity, those closures have resulted in an 18% reduction in capacity, meaning about 1 in 5 childcare subsidized seats are gone. So we see from this, there are fewer subsidized seats that have been the capacity has been reduced. And so we see that the TWC's actions have been very helpful. But we also know that so many more providers are still struggling to keep their doors open. And remember that behind every closed childcare program is a triple economic impact on the working parents, on their employers, and the teachers and staff of that childcare program. At this point, we don't know whether these closures are temporary or permanent, but what we do know is this. When COVID-19 is finally behind us, our workforce and our economy really must depend on the childcare providers and their programs to be open so that parents can get back to work. So here are just a few things I'd like to suggest that we could consider to ensuring that that happens. One, and Kim mentioned this a moment ago, distribute the remaining $171 million of CCDBG CARES Act funding to help our struggling childcare providers. Those who've remained open have done so despite the personal health risks and the increased cost. And they believe that early education and care really is their mission and calling. So let's help them continue to remain in business by allocating these funds. Next, we'd love to see increased focus on public and private investment in childcare. This could be an employee benefit offered for employees or by investing in childcare options like co-opt childcare programs or contracted slots in childcare programs. Next, we'd love to really encourage that we maximize and layer all available resources to pay the true cost of quality, especially the very high cost for infant and toddler care. And insist on a stronger partnership between childcare providers and our public school system. The increased enrollment of 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds in public pre-K really actually threatens the stability of the childcare ecosystem because childcare providers struggle to make ends meet if they're only caring for the high cost segment of that market, which is infants and toddlers. And finally, we would really hope to see an early education career lattice that ensures an equitable living wage for early learning professionals. We might look at other industries like public education or nursing to see how this can be scaled and latticed. More than 1 in 6 women in America who are childcare workers lives below the poverty rate. Okay, 1 in 6 women. And that's twice the poverty rate for women workers overall. Early learning professionals should be able to earn increased wages as they increase their credentials. And we cannot expect to build a stable profession when we're only paying minimum wage. Over the past 4 or 5 months, more people have begun to understand that childcare is an essential workforce support and that childcare workers are the necessary workforce behind the workforce that we must have to restart our economy. So I hope we will take the necessary steps now to begin building a more equitable, stable, and functioning early childhood system for all our tiniest Texans, for their parents who are in our current workforce, and for those early childhood educators who are preparing our future workforce. Thank you so much, Chairman Anchía and members. We appreciate your oversight of this program and your commitment to building a stable and strong Texas childcare system. Thank you.
Thank you, Tori. We're grateful for your testimony. It's good to see you. Next, I'd like to call up Dr. Teresa Granillo of Avance. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you, Chairman Anchía, and thank you to all the members for your time today. So I am the CEO at Avance, and many of you know Avance's work in terms of doing 2-gen innovation for early childhood, really focusing on parent education and early childhood education. And as Chairman Anchía has shared, we really focus on ensuring that parents have the resources and the encouragement to be their children's first teachers, and that the home is the first classroom. We operate across the state of Texas, and Chairman Anchía knows us from Dallas, but we're also in San Antonio, Austin, Houston, and the Rio Grande Valley. What you may not know is that we actually have a family child care program where we work with family child care providers to increase quality in their home-based centers. This program actually was created back in 2000 as a response to the parents from our program. After they graduated from our parent-child education program, they were very empowered, and they wanted to do something. They wanted to increase their career, their education. And so a lot of the comadres, they would get together, and so the moms would say, well, I want to go back to school, but she has a little infant at home. And so the comadres would say, hey, I'll take your children, you go to school, and then we'll swap later. So they started creating these family-based childcare, centers in their homes. And much like Chairman Anchía had mentioned, in our culture, it's very common for this to happen, and for the family, friends, and neighbors to be taking care of the children. And so with this growing need, we knew that the parents that were graduating from our program had the early childhood education from our parent-child education program, but what they didn't have was all the information about running a quality childcare center in their home. And so we created a curriculum with the support of the Annie Casey Foundation to help support them. So in a way, we were supporting the workforce, right? Our parents going into the workforce and creating jobs out of something that they were doing in their own home. We were also supporting the other parents who were going back into the workforce or going to pursue their education. And so this is a program that kind of went dormant for a few years, and we've revived it in the last couple of years, largely because of the crisis that we've had in the state of Texas in terms of quality deserts, and thinking about where we serve, predominantly in rural areas. So in the rural area down in the Rio Grande Valley, and then really supporting parent choice and recognizing the cultural values and preferences of the Latinx community that we serve, and really making sure that they have quality options. And so we've been doing this work in Hidalgo County. We did this last year, where we had all of our home-based childcare providers go through our curriculum to increase quality. And so we had great outcomes with that, not only in terms of those who are getting the quality standard and rating, but also in terms of the children who are in their care actually scoring higher on school readiness outcomes. And so we have, with the support of the Texas Workforce Commission, we received funding to expand this work into Travis County. And so we are currently in the process of recruiting 50 home-based childcare providers to go through our program to increase quality, with the goal of getting them into Texas Rising Star. I will say, though, that with COVID, there's been a few things that have clearly happened. One is that our home-based childcare providers in Hidalgo, 40% have closed, largely due to obviously low enrollment, but also COVID cases. So as you all know, the Valley is a hotspot right now. And when you're operating a home-based childcare provider, home-based childcare center, you don't always have the luxury of having an enclosed space where you can monitor everything happening in terms of everyone coming in and out of the house. So some of our providers have had family members who live in the house. They're not in the licensed portion of the home, but they live in the house, have had COVID, so they had to shut down their operations. If a parent or child, right, in their care has reported COVID, they've had to shut down operations. But there's also, even those that are still open are struggling with everything that everybody's been talking about here today in terms of low enrollment. Having access to PPE has been a really big issue. And again, there are a lot of these home-based childcare providers, they don't have all of the resources that centers often do, and they need what NECA talked about, that shared services support. They need it so badly. The other thing to think about too is a lot of them, particularly in our rural areas, don't have access to technology. Not just do they not have a tablet or a computer in their home, there's literally no tower in that area to be able to even connect to. So asking them to fill out applications online or to, access resources online, it's just not a possibility. And so we have to really think about that and have to be creative in how we support those essential childcare providers who, by the way, are supporting our essential workers, right? Our frontline workers. We're asking folks to open the economy back up, and our parents oftentimes are that frontline, and they need to get back into work, but and their choice and their options are often these home-based childcare providers. And so we really need to make sure that we're taking those into consideration as we're thinking about where the next round of funding is going. I will talk a little bit about the work that we're doing with the Texas Workforce Commission and the work in Travis County. We've had to delay some of the start of this program, but as we've started to talk to the providers in the Travis County area, they're incredibly excited because they feel so isolated right now. They have no one to talk to, and they need these shared services. That's something that keeps coming up. They need a pool for substitutes. They need the admin support to be able to apply for PPP loans. They don't even have that support to do that. And so they're not necessarily being able to access the opportunities that other childcare providers are during this time. And most importantly, we have to think about that our parents want quality and they want the choice to take their children to family, friends, and neighbors, to these home-based providers in their neighborhood. And as NECA had showed, that pool of quality home-based childcare options, 7%, it's just not enough. And so we really are excited and grateful to TWC for investing in our program to train and support home-based childcare providers to increase their quality and to get their Texas Rising Star status so that they can so that we can increase not only quality, but the supply as we know that we need it. And so, one of the things that my biggest plug and ask of legislature and members here is obviously to continue to invest in quality, but please do not forget our family-based childcare providers. Chairman Anchía is the perfect testimonial of the importance of that. I know growing up, I had the same thing. I didn't know that it was called family-based childcare provision back then, but my mom took me to a neighbor's home that she trusted because she needed to go to work. And so we cannot ask our parents to go back into the workforce without providing opportunities for quality and affordable childcare. And so I just urge you to continue to think about parent choice and keep our home-based childcare providers in mind. Thank you for your time today and for your commitment to the very important domain of childcare and recognizing the importance, particularly right now, but the impact that it has not only for our workforce, but for our earliest learners and our future workforce. Thank you.
Teresa and Avance touches a lot of the districts throughout the state that are represented on this call. Certainly your work at Gabe P. Allen Elementary in West Dallas. I guess I was sharing with Teresa when I first started as a school board member, there was this little program that somebody told me about that was happening in a portable building at this pre-K through 3 learning center in West Dallas. And I went to check it out and what I saw was absolute magic. So I'm so happy to see how your organization has grown. Teresa also raises an interesting issue that I want to sort of tease up with our friends at Texas Workforce Commission. I know how difficult it is for any small business, how difficult it was for any small business to apply for a PPP loan. And you saw the data on the earlier presentations about how few childcare providers were actually able to apply. Technical assistance on that might be a really fantastic role to play if we get another investment by the federal government in PPP loans, sort of creating a statewide clearinghouse where TWC maybe can either assist or make an application on behalf of some of these early learning centers. I've talked to single practitioner lawyers, for example, and these are folks with at least some infrastructure in their offices and the skill set to be able to navigate federal rules. And many of them were so discouraged by the PPP program that they didn't apply either. So I can just imagine for people whose core business is taking care of kids and not reading federal rules and understanding federal processes, that was a huge barrier to make application for many of our, especially home-based childcare providers. So if we get another round of loans, that may be something that the state wants to help facilitate, because it can be Byzantine and difficult and discouraging. So thanks for raising those issues. A couple of our speakers have done that. So I'll stop talking. Sorry, I did it too. Mute. All right, did y'all hear what I said?
No.
This amazing soliloquy I did in my own head. All right, so the next speaker that I want to welcome is Chelsea Jeffrey. She's the Senior Manager of Early Matters Dallas. And I want to welcome you, and you have the last word today, and then we'll go to Q&A. Thanks, Chelsea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having me today. And I want to share, you know, as the chairman mentioned earlier, I started off in education as a Teach for America teacher. I started off as a high school math teacher, so very separate from early childhood education. But what I found as teaching 17, 18-year-olds algebra is that the reason that they couldn't solve for X is because they didn't have a strong early childhood education foundation. And that's why I've spent the past several years really focusing on the intersection between our school districts and our childcare providers, and how we can create a robust aligned system between those two ecosystems to make sure that every child has a strong early education foundation that sets them up for future success. This is also a very personal issue to me, because I am the current working stay-at-home parent of a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And so many of the challenges that both our parents are facing and our childcare providers are facing, I am living in that moment right now. And so just want to talk a little bit about how we've seen that play out in Dallas and some of the innovative solutions that we've seen here locally. And so back in 2017, Early Matters Dallas really started looking at childcare as a workforce issue. And we worked with the Boston Consulting Group and issued a report that really looked at the middle skills workforce gap and the impact of childcare on our middle skilled labor force. And what we found with that is that 60% of our non-working parents cited childcare as a top 5 issue for why they had not returned to the workforce after having children. Particularly for infants and toddlers, as others have mentioned earlier, we had a 14,000 seat gap between parents who had infants and toddlers and who would be willing to send their child to childcare, go back to work, and the actual number of seats available for our infants and toddlers. And so fast forward 3 years, it's now 2020. We know that the pandemic has hit. Since the beginning of the pandemic in March, we've had 151 childcare centers closed just in Dallas County. Imagine what that looks like across the state, as others have mentioned earlier. That has been a loss just here locally of 18,802 seats for childcare. And so, like my colleagues have said, we at Commit and at Early Matters Dallas really applaud the work of the Texas Workforce Commission. They have been flexible, they have pivoted quickly, and they have strategically supported our childcare centers throughout the subsidy system. But as Reagan mentioned, only 12% of our childcare center capacity is filled with children who are on the subsidy program. So that means that 88% of our capacity within the system is not getting those supports that TWC is providing, because many of them only went towards the children who were in the subsidy system. We saw this play out in Dallas County. As I mentioned earlier, we had 151 centers closed. Many of those are actually located in our more suburban, middle income and higher income neighborhoods, because they didn't have access to those same supports that TWC is offering. And while we need to continue to support our subsidy system, and that is critically important to our workforce and our economy, we also know that childcare is an ecosystem that impacts families of every single income level. So the closures of these centers is really critical for the economic development for our region, because we know that for the economy to be able to fully open after COVID-19, there are now thousands of children who are without childcare. And for our parents to be able to return to work, we have to make sure that all of our centers are able to reopen across the state, and they need that continued financial and technical assistance support to be able to do that. As Representative Anchía had mentioned, the PPP loan was a great resource for many of our providers, but only 20% of them were able to access that loan. It only lasted for 8 weeks. This pandemic has stretched on much further than that, and so many of our providers are kind of running on the very thin margins that they were already operating on, even for a longer period of time with very little financial assistance. So while this is a really challenging time for our childcare providers, there's also hope, and we've seen some really innovative solutions being launched, but we need the support of our state agencies, the support of our legislator, and the support of our federal government to really sustain those innovations. So one, as others have mentioned earlier, is just the continued development of a qualified trained childcare workforce. We've mentioned that the average childcare worker makes about $9.75 an hour. Right now, they can go to Amazon and be delivering packages for $15 an hour. So how do we convince those same childcare workers who in their heart really want to love, serve, and educate children right now, that it's better for them to actually sustain this childcare workforce than it is to go deliver packages? Additionally, we want to be able to offer incentives for employers to be able to support their working families with childcare on site. And so this is something really innovative that I think the legislature is in a unique position to provide, is how do we incentivize our employers to create a really robust working parent environment that offers on-site quality childcare for their employees, that is safe, it is quality, and it provides a living wage for their providers, as well as help support their families who are just trying to struggle to afford childcare right now. And one of the most important things that I have personally seen as an impact for families and how they are thinking through childcare and whether or not to send their child, whether it's childcare or to school, is having access to transparent, reliable, and real-time data about the COVID-19 and what precautions are most effective in keeping their child safe. Every single parent wants most for their child, for them to be safe, for them to be healthy, for them to be happy, and for them to be learning. And right now, the big thing on parents' minds is whether or not it's safe to send their child to school. We're getting misinformation or new information from multiple sources on a regular basis. At the beginning of the pandemic, we were told that children couldn't get coronavirus. We now know that that's not the case. And this is a new virus. Things are rapidly changing. And so the more that we can have transparent information about how to keep our kids safe, the more likely parents are going to go back and actually enroll their children when the pandemic ends, and really be able to support centers with getting back up to that full enrollment, as Kim mentioned earlier in that iron triangle diagram. We also at Early Matters Dallas run a pre-K campaign across North Texas, and that has a text messaging system that allows us to directly communicate with parents who are trying to enroll their child, whether it's in childcare-based pre-K or in public school pre-K. The challenges and the fears are the same for those parents. They want to know that it's safe. They want to know what systems are being put in place, what precautions are being put in place to keep their children and families safe right now. And so having access to data that shows us for centers who have had outbreaks, what were the practices and policies that they were following? What were the class sizes? Were children required to wear masks? Did they have access to PPE and sanitizing equipment? Compared to centers who maybe had one child who got sick, but no one else in the center got sick. What are the different precautions that are taking place? How do we share that information and put in policies and systems that support our providers and support our families with making those informed decisions that are what's best for their family right now? And finally, for me personally, I've spent a lot of my time over the past few years working with school districts and childcare providers to create partnerships for pre-K. What's been great about this pandemic is that, and kind of like Kim, I hesitate to say great here, but those partnerships have actually allowed for really innovative solutions. Earlier this year, when the pandemic first hit, Tori and I worked really closely with Dallas ISD, the YMCA, and a local partner, Big Thought, to create an emergency childcare center for essential workers. And that was to help meet the needs between the district closing down. How do we support school-age children? How do we also ensure that we have healthcare workers that can go to work? And we've seen those partnerships really continue to flourish during this time. Districts who were not considering having pre-K partnerships a year ago are now thinking, okay, I have kids who are going to have to be virtual for the first start of this school year. I know their parents are working and they're sending their child to childcare. Should I send a teacher's assistant? Should I send a paraprofessional or an actual teacher to that center to help those children with their schoolwork? And so we're starting to see doors open for truly innovative partnerships and an alignment of the ecosystem between birth up into our school-age children. And so what I would really recommend is, as Kim said earlier, this is a chance for us to be bold. It's a chance for us to take the next step in aligning not just our pre-K-12 education system, but aligning our birth through workforce education system. We're in a unique position where a lot of these agencies have already been talking. TWC, TEA, childcare licensing have been talking, but how do we truly align those systems to benefit children across the educational system? And so these partnerships could look a variety of different ways. It could truly be an enrollment partnership right now. We know schools are closing, childcare centers are open. It could be an enrollment partnership. It could be a technology partnership. As Teresa mentioned, there are some areas where there's not even a cell tower where families can get access to internet. So how do we provide hotspots to these childcare centers and home-based providers? Can we provide laptops and other technology that the school district is already distributing to those families? How do we also make sure that our childcare providers can provide that one-on-one support or classroom support for those children who are enrolled in their center? It could also look like our districts really learning from our childcare providers about those safety measures. As I mentioned earlier, our childcare providers have been open since March when this pandemic hit. Some of them have learned really quickly, how do I actually operate an early grades classroom where children are constantly touching each other? There's manipulatives, there's hands-on learning. How do we make sure that our school districts are learning from those lessons that our childcare providers have been living for the past 6 months, so that our school districts are also creating safe, welcoming, and high quality learning environments for our youngest learners? So while this pandemic has created numerous challenges, it has also created an opportunity for us to innovate and make our systems better. And so thank you for inviting us all here today. Everyone on this call has spent their life really working in childcare and making sure that our children have the best foundation possible for future early learning. And what we can do to support both our current workforce and our future workforce is dependent on this industry.
Thank you for your presentation today. I want to just kick off with the questions that we received from Representative Howard. I saw her on the call earlier. She may have jumped off, so I'm just going to ask them all. And if you don't mind writing them down, and whoever wants to take the question, just, raise your hand or just put your index finger in the air. So just really quickly. All right. So what is the status of enhanced child care rates, subsidy rate? How is it being funded, and how long is that funding stream expected to last? I think we covered the first part of that question, but maybe from TWC, how long is the current funding stream expected to last if we did not expend the $170 or so million that remained uninvested?
Right now, we expect the $200 million that's budgeted to last through the end of August.
Got it. Okay. And then the next question from Representative Howard is, how is the state going to help child care centers with the cost accrued by complying with the state's health and safety standards?
So the primary mechanism that we've done this is through those enhanced reimbursement rates by providing that additional plus up in the reimbursement rate. Providers have some additional resources really to be able to expend on whatever they need, which could include higher costs for health and safety.
Thank you.
Chairman Anchía, can
Yes,
I add?
go on,
I think part of that, and Reagan's absolutely correct, but I think part of that question is left unanswered because we don't have enough funds to cover the current costs, and as everyone has presented, those costs or those enhancements are only going to a certain percentage of providers. So there's still a lot of providers out there who aren't receiving anything else if they receive the PPP, they've gotten that, but they haven't received anything else. So I think that pushed to our federal government to continue their work and continue their negotiations to bring more funding down. Looking at briefly at those bills that are there, and I'm by no means an expert on those bills, but they have done some creative things that's not just through CCBG, that is some other mechanisms that could open up some other pots. But of course, that has to all get approved and passed. So we are waiting. So I think part of that question is still left unanswered.
And Kim, just as a follow-up, NECA talked about the cost of the quality, the cost of quality being about $15,000 a year. Is that equated with NAEYC or TAEYC standards? Because I remember when I chaired the Child Development Center board before I even got an elected public service, I remember how expensive it was to hit qualitative standards.
Mm-hmm.
And is that what we're talking about? That sort of gap between maybe what is being offered and that highest quality standard?
And NECA may be able to know what those figures are, which if she does, I don't know where those numbers came from. And I know that cost of quality care is it's a moving target too, depending on which ones you're using, if that's through the TRS standards or if that's through the national standards. So I'm not sure where those lived.
All right. Well, let me ask you, because I always ask. I understand what things cost by seeing what they cost in the open market, right? So like
right.
In the open market in Dallas, for parents that they pay upwards of about $25,000 to $30,000 for pre-K through 12 education in the private market, right? Not in the public market. If you were to go to the private market, what does the highest quality early childhood cost for birth to pre-K?
Per year, per child, and then it all varies on your age of the child too, right? So infant care is more expensive than pre-K care,
right?
Right, but it ranges usually between $8,000 and $12,000 a year, depending on your market and depending on what age group you are. So in lots of cases, our families are paying more for childcare per year than they will 18 years later when they go to college and pay college tuition, and they've had 18 years to prepare and save for college, but they don't for childcare. So yeah, so it's right around that $10,000 a year, depending on the market and depending on your age of your child.
And Chairman Anchía, I will jump in and say that I think this is highlighting the need for a cost of quality study in our state that gives us those figures so that we know what it actually costs in the state of Texas.
That's helpful. I remember, we put our daughters in at 20 months, and it was about 12 grand a year from 20 months to when they started the equivalent of kindergarten at the time. It was a little Montessori school. And so I just figured that's what it costs in the private market, and that on an unsubsidized basis for those who can pay, that's it. That's what the market says it costs. Cindy, you're on mute.
Yes, I just wanted to add, because we had looked at, for each of the states, we had generated some fact sheets around cost of childcare. And just as Kim was saying, it is more expensive for infants. Based on our study, center-based care for infants ran at $9,100. And for 4-year-olds, it's a little less at about $6,800. And then also to compare, that's for center-based care, and then looking at family child care homes, excuse me, which tend to be less expensive. For infants and toddlers, it's about $7,000 annually, and for 4-year-olds, about $5,400. So it is quite expensive, and it does add up, as you've heard expressed, to the cost of a college education. It's an astonishing amount of percentage of household income, ranging all the way from 9 to 17% of annual household income to pay for childcare.
Wow. Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just make
Reagan?
a quick comment that when also to piggyback on what NECA was saying about a cost of quality study, the important thing is to also realize what's happened over the last 4 or 5 or 6 years with the expansion of public pre-K, because historically these childcare providers have been able to have children in their programs from birth to 5 or when they exit to kindergarten. And as has been mentioned many times, the cost of infant care is so expensive, but historically it's been offset by the payment of having 3 and 4 and sometimes 5-year-olds in these programs. And so that, and then the after school children. So that has been sort of the profit margin that has been used to offset the high cost of infant toddler care. So to the extent that we're doing a survey to look at the true cost of quality, and particularly to address the real need for more infant and toddler care, we need to be looking at it in this context of without 3 and 4-year-olds in the center, it's even the cost is even higher because you've got the fixed cost of the director, some of the additional support staff where they can't spread those costs among the different age groups.
Thank you for that. All right, I want to open it up to members who are on the call. If you can either unmute, both unmute yourself and show yourselves. If any members have questions. Okay. How about staffs? If staff has questions, can you unmute yourselves and identify yourselves? All right. No takers. Well, all right. I have another question then. If we were to put a price tag, and I know some of this is going to be related to cost of care, but if we were to put a price tag on eliminating the entire waiting list for childcare services in the state, what's the scope of magnitude? I mean, I saw that one chart that showed how many people, and this is not even getting to quality. Let's just say existing quality, eliminate the backlog. Does anybody have kind of a top of mind figure? And I know and I may have caught you off guard here, but maybe this is something that the International Relations and Economic Development Committee can help come up with in collaboration with all of you, is, you know, a scope of magnitude figure, and then also a cost of care, at least a, you know, SWAG method, scientific wild ass guess, if we could maybe put that in our interim report. So anybody want to take a shot at that piece?
I was just going to tell Reagan to dream big.
Well, so I mean, I will tell you, as we've looked at what the cost of care is right this moment, and those numbers fluctuate, $1 million can probably pay for annual kids in care of about 150. So if you took the 28,000 on the waiting list and divided it by 150, you'd get $187 million.
Okay.
That would only be for 1 year.
Right.
That would be an annual cost to serve those kids based on what we're seeing right now.
And I would add to that, Tori can speak to how Dallas has seen, but once our wait list opened up, we saw a significant number of families apply for childcare subsidies that had not been previously on the wait list, because the fact that there is a wait list is a turnoff for many families. And so even just looking at who's on the wait list right now, that may not encompass the full eligible interested families who would want to access the childcare subsidies.
That's right. In Dallas County alone, we have 3,000 children who are on the wait list, but so many more have just given up because they know how long it is. By the time their child gets to the top of the wait list, their children have entered pre-K. Mm-hmm. And so there's a defeatist attitude a little bit for parents that just don't think it's going to ever be possible. And that's a huge shame.
And I would also say waiting list is not an indication of need.
Right.
A waiting list is a program management tool based on those families that have approached Workforce Solutions for assistance.
So again, using the swag method, we're at about 360 million. And if we round up to maybe contemplate those who are discouraged and might be encouraged by additional slots, let's call it 400 million for the biennium, right? I mean, so because we do our budgets every 2 years, so you gave us kind of a, and I won't hold you to these figures. I'm just trying to understand. So let's say it's 400.
Yes, these are very high estimates. If my data person is listening, he's probably,
Yeah, his
a
head's
little
exploding.
It is.
Too low, you're too low. So let's say it's 400 million for the biennium, and now we haven't even touched the quality piece, right? So now let's talk about the delta between current normal and the new normal, where we would be providing enhanced quality. And I saw NECA's delta there. It was about half, right? That was the delta, about 50% to get to the higher quality figure. Is that right? And I may be misremembering, NECA, your chart that showed kind of, the current qualitative cost and the, yeah, did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. So if you take the 400 million for biennium and you say we're about half cost now, we're about 400 million, 800 million then,
Just make an even billion.
Yeah, just an even, right? And then what might be interesting, and I know I'm giving Jeff work and his head is certainly exploding, but we may want to sort of present these top level figures and then work with the agency to drill down, both TWC and HHSC, to try to drill down and come up with slightly better projections, and these may be spot on, but bolster that so that when IRED makes its recommendations to the entire legislature, we have some data to work with. But let's say we're talking about a full billion per biennium, 500 million per year, a full billion per biennium. What then we should look for is data to suggest what that return on investment would be. And I'm sure you all have looked at ROI. Maybe Cindy has data for Texas on that ROI as well, because I think there's a compelling case to be made that with all the demands on the state's finances next cycle, and they're going to be significant. We're also facing a double whammy of depressed and collapsed oil and gas prices plus collapsed sales tax, and so I think any new money is going to be very, very difficult. So everybody's going to have to make a pretty compelling ROI argument. But I cannot envision a robust recovery without addressing this issue. I just can't. And I don't know how we put women, especially women of color, back to work during this cycle if we can't solve for childcare. So does anybody want to offer up any final words, any of our panelists, invited speakers, before we close out? Y'all don't be shy.
I think those are really good final words.
I love it that you're thinking big. Thank you so much.
I see Representative Rosenthal just popped up. John, do you want to say anything?
Well, I don't have a question, but I do want to thank you all for this valuable conversation. I mean, it's really eye-opening. And, you think about this stuff in the back of your head, but man, there's a significant piece of our economy that's going to rely on this, and finding solutions to these challenges is what's right in front of us. And our economic recovery is going to depend on it, right? So thank you guys so much for bringing this. And I want copies of all these presentations if I could get them, please.
You will get them, Representative. Jeff Madden, who's the IRED committee director and helped facilitate this call, will make sure you receive them immediately with a capital M. Representative Romero, you've been here through the entirety. Any final words for you? You've been listening attentively and participating. You want to go off mute and give us some final words?
I'm just really thrilled to be a part of it and listen in today. And I can't help but go back to those words that were said. I don't remember the speaker, but you know, sort of the unsung heroes there, the frontline workers that keep the rest of us moving. Being you know, someone that's familiar to your story too, Chairman Anchía, I do know that you know, we are relying on our families and our abuelitas and our abuelitos, our tios and tias to take care of our kids. I do have tremendous concern for the fear of public charge and whether or not these public dollars will then prevent our families from getting those necessary opportunities to go into childcare. I'm also concerned with the fact that as kids go back to school, if they don't go to a childcare agency, a licensed agency, does that mean that abuelita and abuelito are taking care of that child and therefore submitting themselves to greater opportunities to contract COVID? So that's a really big concern for me. I didn't want to ask the question because I knew that we could all go on in that for a long, long time. I just hope that that's food for thought for the future in terms of how is our Latino undocumented community looking at receiving these funds, what are they going to do, and how often are we seeing that they're not actually putting their children in childcare for sake of some of these fears that they have. Not going to go into saying the next biennium we may have a new president, but I hope things change. But I don't know that the community is going to change that quickly. That this is something that hasn't become permanent within the Latino community. So just my hat's off to all of you guys for choosing such a noble career, for making childcare and early childhood development a part of your lives and a part of all of our future. So thank you very much.
Well said, well said. And Representative Rosenthal is from Harris County, and Representative Romero holds it down in Tarrant County. I see there are a couple of other members. Any final words from members? Okay, hearing none, we'll bring this town hall to an end. I'm really grateful to all the participants, the staff members, all the people who are on YouTube Live following the proceedings. Again, this will be recorded on YouTube, and you can go back and watch it, and we will distribute the materials to all the registered participants. Everybody stay safe, wear your damn mask, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.